Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh. With me today is our co-host, Chris Bixby, Matt Bingel, and his pal, Julius Snoof. How you guys doing?
Good.
Nice. Who do we have today?
Today's guest we have for today, he's an actor and he's also a puppeteer. He is a part of lots of projects with the Muppets, and he actually did lots of characters for a show that most of us grew up with, Dinosaurs. He also directed to a show that I grew up with, mostly Sid the Science Kid, and he did lots of other stuff we can talk about later. Here he is, Mr. Allan Trautman. How are you doing, Allan?
I'm doing great. Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Good to see you too.
Good to see you.
Yes, great to see you. Pleasure to have you here. To kick things off, we know who you are, but for those who don't, would you care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm Allan Trautman. I mean, you did a pretty good job.
Thank you.
You kind of covered the basics. I'm
Thank you.
Mostly a puppeteer. I've done some acting also. I started out, I was trained as an actor and then sort of discovered puppeteering halfway through college. And never looked back.
Awesome. So, can you talk about your background and how you grew up?
Wow. Growing up, I grew up in New York. I was born in Brooklyn. I lived there till I was 13, and it was like a completely unremarkable childhood. I have no deep traumas that have influenced my work. It was all pretty smooth sailing for me. We moved to Florida when I was 13. I went to high school there at South Beach, not South Beach, Miami Beach Senior High. And went off to college in St. Louis at Washington University in St. Louis. Started studying theater there, and then that's when I started puppeteering also on a TV show that was shooting locally there. And then I did my graduate work at Cal Arts in acting. I spent 2 years there, or here in LA. And now I live about 15 minutes from Cal Arts.
Nice.
Wow.
Really nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Very, very nice. So how did you first get into acting and puppeteering?
I was always interested in acting. Even when I was a kid, I would do school plays. So I was a theater kid all through high school. It was all about theater. It was just me and all the other theater nerds hanging out, doing theater stuff, thinking about nothing but theater outside of our academic work. And by the time I got to undergraduate school, I was actually starting to study physics. Because academically, I was always interested in science. Theater was always sort of a recreational thing for me. And so when I started college, I was like, all right, I'll go into physics. And then about a year into that, I was like, I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life working in a lab. Doing plays is much more fun. So I decided to get a double major in theater and drama, and I studied drama through college as well as physics. And then when I graduated, I studied 2 years of conservatory type work in acting. And after that, it was just, grinding away here in the LA theater scene, working on small theater, 99-seat theater shows, and eventually doing commercials and things like that. And then making my way back to puppeteering through friends I had here in LA, I discovered all the puppeteering work that was available. It's like, well, at that point I had worked professionally as a puppeteer in college on the show called The Letter People. And so I figured, all right, well, look, I'm in front of the camera, I'm working, I'm earning money. It's pretty much like acting.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing. And for about 10 years, I did both sort of side by side on a dual track until I started working for the Hensons. When I worked on Jim hired me for the Muppet Vision 3D, which was
yes.
yeah, that showed at the parks. And he needed a bunch of LA puppeteers to be background work. And so I started working for the company then. And the very next year, Dinosaurs happened. And after that, I had very little time for other acting work.
Yeah. It's interesting. So you mentioned Dinosaurs. Actually, before we did this interview, I actually rewatched the first episode of Dinosaurs. Very, very funny
What do you
show.
think?
It was amazing. It's a very funny show.
It was pretty amazing. We just made our way through all 65 episodes on Disney Plus,
Yeah.
and I can see things where it's like, oh, that first season was a little rough, and I was still learning how to do animatronics back then. And the character I did, Fran, underwent a pretty major redesign after the first season. They changed her whole look. Nobody seems to have noticed at all. It's not like we got letters or anything, which is pretty funny. But it was a better puppet at that point. It did more. It was better at talking. The first one was just like just big clumpy teeth. The second one had a little more finesse to it.
Okay, yeah.
But the writing was always really sharp. After the first just few episodes, really, things started clicking. And by second season, oh man, it was really firing on all cylinders. It was a joy to rewatch those.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Getting into the puppetry and acting fields, who are some of your inspirations?
Well, Jim Henson, first of all, obviously was the blueprint for everything I've done as a performer. His work is what I saw. Back when I was starting out in the 70s, there wasn't really a lot of training in that style of puppetry. I knew of, by the time I started working on the Letter People in college. I had seen a few seasons of Sesame Street, even though I was in college. I didn't really watch the show, but I was obviously aware of what was going on the show because it was a pretty groundbreaking show. But the Muppet Show hadn't debuted yet, and so there wasn't really any training in that style of puppetry. It was relatively new and kind of confined to the Henson world. But gradually, a few other people started doing the same type of thing with those types of puppets. And all of my training then at that point was basically on the job training. First with the Letter People, and then here early in LA during the 80s with people like Dave Pavlonis and other projects that I worked on. And it was really, we were kind of training ourselves in how to do this. And we would just watch ourselves and try and do better next time.
Yeah.
That was basically the training we had. So it's a lot different now.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of answers the next question, but I do want to ask this may be a difficult question to answer. Do you have a favorite Muppet?
A favorite Muppet? Not really. I mean, for me, I know all the people who performed them originally. I know all the people who perform them now. We're all friends and co-workers, and the characters become entwined with the performers in my mind after a while, so that I see the characters as an extension of their personalities, of who they are. Every character is really like that. Even for actors, for good actors, the characters they perform are extensions of one part of themselves. At least there's a good actor will find in themselves some identity with the character they're playing. But especially with the Muppet characters, those all came out of and were developed with the help of the people who performed them. And so it's hard for me to have a favorite, because I know all of the people, and they're all just the wonderful, sweetest people in the world. And so I can't really pick out a favorite.
That's fine. I mean, there's so many as well. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot.
Too many to name off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Can you talk about how you began working for the Jim Henson Company and the Muppets?
Yeah, that was the first project I did with them was the Muppet Vision 3D. So most of the work they were doing at that time was either in London or New York. New York for Sesame Street, and a lot of the TV production, like the Muppet Show and all that, was done in London, and the feature films mostly were done there too. So when they came to here to do Muppet Vision 3D with Disney, they needed a huge number of, like 25 extra puppeteers for background characters and for these huge setups that they had for the I don't know if you're familiar with the piece, but the finale is this just big over the top patriotic production number with marching toy soldiers playing instruments and fireworks and all of the Miss Piggy as the Statue of Liberty. So they needed 25 LA local puppeteers. They weren't going to bring people in from outside because it costs less to hire puppeteers in LA. And so I had a friend whose wife was choreographing the Muppet suit performers who were performing in the theme parks at that point. And so he knew about these auditions, and he called me and said, hey, I can get your name in on these auditions if you want. I said, yes, please. And so then I auditioned for that, and was one of the 25 puppeteers who got to work with Jim for the first time on that production.
Yeah,
which was great. And so after that, the company knew about me. Jim had picked 4 of us to continue working with him on these screenings that were happening for the movie. Before it was installed at Disneyland, they wanted to see how it was going to work with all of the animatronic characters in the theater, which was part of the act. And so before they had all the animatronics set, they just wanted to screen the movie and have people puppeteering the movie, the puppets, to the recorded soundtrack. So, and then they would do these screenings for Michael Eisner and all of the Disney brass, or just, things like that. And so we were one of 4 puppeteers, and I think I was doing me and Kevin Carlson, who was the one who got me in originally.
Oh, yeah. We previously got Kevin Carlson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Previous guest.
Yeah, he was nice.
His wife, Susan, was the choreographer who I was talking about earlier. So I owe a lot to Kevin.
Awesome.
And so Kevin and I think we're doing Statler and Waldorf puppets,
Oh, wow.
So huge thrill for me at that point,
Yeah.
to work like that with Jim. And then after he passed away, Dinosaurs came around and they were aware of me, and I got brought into audition, and there you go.
Yeah.
Nice, awesome. What was it like getting to meet and work with the other Muppet puppeteer performers for the first time?
It was pretty amazing. I remember was it on no, it was Dinosaurs, that's right. I'd seen these guys before on Muppet Vision 3D, but we weren't working all of that closely together. It was
Right.
we were just doing mostly background stuff. um but I remember the first day I showed up, we all showed up on the lot for Dinosaurs, and I'm like, I think the first time I saw Dave Goles, I had walked into the men's room,
Oh boy.
and I'm standing there, and Dave Goles walks in next to me. It's like, oh man, I can't start up a conversation now. This is so awkward. So
Oh my.
but it was a wonderful experience working with all those guys. I learned a lot from them, and at that point it was like, oh yeah, this is the best job in the world.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned Muppet Vision 3D, and since that was one of Jim Henson's final projects, what was it like getting to work with him?
It was wonderful. He was he as other people have said about his work, he listens to everybody. Anybody who has a suggestion, he'll listen to it, and then he'll do what he was probably going to do in the first place anyway, because his ideas are great.
Yeah.
But every now and then there were some good ideas. There was I'll give you an example. One scene, one shot in Muppet Vision 3D involved just a close-up of this cannon going off. It was supposed to be just like a timing thing.
Mhm.
And there were a bunch of soldiers lined up next to it. And it was the cannon, and then me, and then Steve Whitmire, and then a couple of other puppeteers. And we rehearsed it once. And I said to Steve, Steve, hey, shouldn't we like react when this thing goes off? It's like I'm standing right next to this friggin' thing and it's going off in my ear. Shouldn't I at least like jump or something? And he goes, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's check with Jim. So he calls Jim over, and he says, hey, Allan had a great idea that maybe we should react when the cannon goes off. He goes, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Steve, why don't you switch places with Allan and you can do it? So Steve got to do it and I didn't, but that's okay. But the lesson I got from that is that Jim always knew how to put the people in the foreground who he knew and whose work he was really familiar with. He always put forward the best people for the right job, and I didn't take it as a diss or anything like that. I didn't take it as an insult. I was pleased that Steve mentioned that it was my idea. But that's kind of how he worked. He was always very thoughtful about every little bit of the thing. This was just one little 2-second shot, maybe 1 second, but it rated some thought. If it was worth a setup, it was worth doing right.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Definitely. Since the next question was kind of answered, Matt, why don't you take the next question?
My turn. Thank you, Julius. So I already asked one. My turn. Thanks. Do you have a favorite Dinosaurs character and episode? Character first, then episode. Yeah, character first, then episode.
Episode. I think overall there was the the two-part episode. We only did one two-part episode, which was Nuts to War, parts 1 and 2, which was on the surface a takeoff on all of these miniseries that were popular back in the 90s. They were these big romantic, big budget. This is before, prestige TV on HBO and before The Sopranos and all of that. The big marquee events on television were these miniseries like Roots and the Thorn Birds and things like that. So this was one of those on the surface. But then what they got to do with it was to just vent all the writers, their thoughts about how countries get drawn into war, how people react on an individual basis, how the media contributes to the atmosphere surrounding war. And it's really just a brilliant satire of the whole subject. I thought it was just fantastic. There were many episodes later on too that were just flat out hilarious in a really kind of crazy, surreal kind of a way. I can't think of one in particular right now, but
and again, there were so many episodes.
They just worked.
Episodes, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I was always, obviously, I did Fran in every episode, so I was obviously pretty partial to her. I enjoyed doing the science teacher, Mr. Pullman. He was always a lot of fun because he was such a dork. As now, Miss Charlene, and whenever he got to do some fun stuff, that was always a kind of a lark for me. It's always nice to get to do some other characters.
Definitely. Definitely.
Okay, Julius, your turn. It's been jerking at the end of the shot. Oh, I knew this would be happening. Every time.
No.
You should expect this. Oh, fine. Every time we always do this. Fine. Just ask the question. All right. You've also worked on the series Muppets Tonight. Do you have a favorite celebrity guest who appeared on that?
I don't. I didn't. I wasn't a regular on that show. I did maybe half of the episodes.
Okay.
Because at that time, at the same time, I was working on Unhappily Ever After.
Oh.
Which, not unfortunately, I was happy to do it. It was a great show to work on. It lasted 5 years. So it was a good employment for a freelancer. But that came up before the opportunity to do Muppets Tonight came up. So got to take the job that's there. And so I ended up doing maybe half of the episodes that they did for Muppets Tonight. I remember that work fondly. It was fun work. I remember all the guests being fun to work with and very game in the spirit of the old Muppet Show. And I thought we did some really good work on that show.
Definitely. Yeah, sure. So one of my other favorite Muppet projects you worked on is the movie Muppets from Space. Can you talk about what that experience was like?
Yeah, actually, again, I ended up working only 2 days on Muppets from Space. That was shot out on the East Coast, not here in LA.
Okay.
It was at a studio in, I think, North Carolina. And so they used a lot of New York puppeteers or East Coast puppeteers or London, I don't know. There are a lot of people who could work there more locally as opposed to flying it. But then they had I went out to do the sequences with the lab rats.
Oh yeah,
so many of them.
Yeah, I remember.
And I think they were doing it as a kind of a second unit simultaneously with the main
Okay.
unit. And so they just needed a bunch more puppeteers because there were a bunch of rats. The rats are all these little rod puppets. And they're not hard to do, two of them at the same time, but you get better performances when you're only doing one at a time. So me and I think Bruce Lanoil flew out there.
Yeah, me and Chris actually previously talked to Bruce.
Yeah, he was our first guest.
Very first episode back in July of last year.
We've been friends for a long time, since around 1980.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah,
Bruce, he's awesome.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think they flew the two of us out just for a weekend. They were shooting. They must have gotten really crammed toward the end of the production schedule because they were working on a weekend. At least that's what I recall. At least that's how I think it was. So we flew out and we just did all of these lab scenes with these crazy rats, and it was fun. It's whenever you get to work with the Muppets, it was just hilarious fun.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, for sure. In 2017 and 2018, you performed with the other Muppet performers at the Hollywood Bowl at the O2 Arena. How did it feel getting to work on those?
Those are pretty special. You rarely get to do performances with the Muppets like this in a live theatrical setting. So, and this was a huge production. It was a whole stage show on the vast stage of the Hollywood Bowl. Bobby Moynihan was the was our very game host. He did a fantastic job, and in the silliest of costumes and being asked to do the silliest of things. And by the time we got to the end, we're all on stage, and I'm, for us, again, backstage behind the set piece where we're performing, where all of these puppeteers who are, just one big family. When you get to work with the Muppets and you're doing these big crowd scenes, we work with the same people over and over and over again. So we all know each other very well, and we all work very closely in a kind of a, I don't know, it's all very emotional. And on the finale, we're singing the Rainbow Connection at the end, and it's
great song.
And it was like
all the Muppets.
There were
Muppets there.
There were just as many tears backstage as there were out in the audience.
Yeah, I saw clips of it on YouTube. I think you were doing Uncle Deadly for that.
Yeah.
For the finale, yeah.
Yeah. I ended up doing 2 puppets for that, I think.
Oh wow.
Oh no. Now I don't remember. Yeah, I was doing Uncle Deadly, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yes. It was wonderful. It was really great. It was great.
Yeah, so I know we're running kind of short on time, but I know Matt had a question about another Henson project you worked on.
I did. What was it like working on Sid the Science Kid?
Oh, that was I was very happy with that work. I wasn't a regular on that show, but I came in very often to either as a substitute or an additional performer because I was very familiar with the system that they use, the HDPS system, which is their digital performance system. Sid the Science Kid was a show that was done that looks like a cartoon, and it's all CGI. It is kind of animated, but it's not animated traditionally. It's all performed live. So the puppeteer would perform the face and do the voice, and there would be a suit performer wearing the motion capture reflective suit. And that was the technology back then. and the two were stitched together in the computer. And so there weren't that many people at that point who knew how to do that, who could come in on short notice. So I would come in and do things like that. And then I was given the opportunity to direct a couple of the episodes, which was tremendous amount of fun. And a bit of a challenge, because there's no, a director can come in and look at a set and see a shot through the camera and move people around, move set pieces around, get the lighting just right. But we come in and there's nothing in the room. It's just a big empty volume. And so everything we do has to be either pre-planned about where blocking is going to occur. And then on the day, you have to be able to do everything through the monitors here and then translate it into motion for the actors. It's a fun challenge, and one that gets even more. It gets even multiplied when you're working. When I directed Splash and Bubbles.
Yeah.
Nice, good show.
That was the same technology, but there's essentially no floor for actors to work on. I mean, there is, obviously, but the characters were floating in water, and so they could do things that a normal actor couldn't do. The puppets in that case were physical puppets that we manipulated, just little wooden avatars that had the reflective balls on them that we could move around the set and make them swim. And it was a very fun challenge in that case, because we're not performing as people at that point. You're performing as fish.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So can you share any projects you are working on now?
Let's see. I am. What am I looking forward to? There's I did a few episodes of Slumberkins, which is just being released any day now, I believe, on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a children's show which has a wonderful concept behind it of dealing with young children's emotional development and how young children can learn to deal with their emotions. It's a really wonderful system that they've integrated into the show, and it's really a worthwhile project. So I was happy to work on that.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, Jake, I think it's your question.
It's the fan supporters. You didn't say that question.
Yeah. So what would you like to say to the fans and supporters of your work over the years?
Oh, well, gosh, thanks for watching. It's really wonderful when I bump into people who like grew up, like you say, with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And they'll
The Muppets
see a picture of it.
It's the Science Kid for me.
Yeah. They'll see a picture of it or something and go, "Oh, I remember that show. I used to love watching that show." It's a really good feeling to know that you were a part of people's lives growing up, and that they still remember it after all these years. Every now and then, it even keeps popping up into other pop culture references.
Exactly.
And that's always a fun thing to watch. I just read a whole article on what was it, Screen Crush, about the 20th anniversary of the Country Bears, which I worked on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I haven't seen
that movie.
Oh.
It's bizarre.
Yeah. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It's 20 years this year. I happened to rewatch it last year, and I was like, oh, this is really. It's not what anybody would put in their like top 10 lists, but it's in its own way. It's this charming, funny, goofy, absolutely enchanting film that's just flat out weird at times.
Makes me feel old. I'm older than that movie. I'm 22.
Welcome to the club. Yeah, I'm 22 as well. Feeling old?
I'm 18, so
yeah.
Yeah, well,
but it's nice to be remembered that way.
Yeah, exactly. If people would like to contact you, where can people find you?
I'm on my website's just allantrautman.com if you spell it the right way. ALLANTRAUTMAN. So that might be a little hard to find. Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I have an official page called Allans Fans, which you can see some of my announcements about things I'm doing and things like that.
Yeah.
And there you go. I got all my Tarman stuff up there too from the work.
Nice.
So, awesome.
For the Living Dead.
Nice.
Awesome.
So Matt, why don't you take us home with the last question?
And your
website,
and your social media will be in the description down below.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Everything be down there. Go check them out. Julius, you haven't answered this question in a while. Sure.
Yeah.
So we always ask. We always say this question for last. Of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of, or how do you define nostalgia?
Oh wow! For me, what am I nostalgic about? Let's see. I think of my childhood and just the way we were given kind of free rein to just get on our bikes and go wherever we wanted all day long.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from my childhood. It's just being out until it started getting dark and then getting home as quickly as possible before we got in trouble. I don't even remember what we did. I just remember being on my bike with high handlebars, and, riding around with my friends. Owning our little corner of the world, That's what I think of when I think of nostalgia, is that sense of freedom.
Exactly.
I think that's a great note to end on. But anyway, Allan, thank you so much for being a guest
thank you
on
so
the
much.
podcast.
Yes,
thank you so much. I'm glad for us being your work being part of our childhoods, and keep up your great work and see what's next for you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, maybe.
Thanks, guys.
And maybe next time, if you're interested, maybe next time we'll have you back on and talk about more stuff. I know you've done some on-screen acting as well. Maybe next time you're on, if you're interested in coming back, we could talk more about that.
Yeah, probably can't do a whole show on it, but
yeah. So anyway,
Definitely.
everyone, that brings another episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show to a close. We've absolutely enjoyed our time with Allan Trautman.
Yes.
Stay tuned for our holiday episode coming out later this week. But from all of you, happy holidays, folks.
And always remember to keep nostalgia alive.
Keep nostalgia alive. Happy holidays, folks.
See you next time.
Take care.
See you
Bye.
next year.
Bye.
Thank
you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.